2024 has been over for a bit now, and if you're familiar with the channel, then welcome back to what has become a self-indulgent staple, where I look back at everything that I experienced throughout the year and talk about the stuff that stood out to me the most. And this year is going to be a little different compared to previous ones. I'm not going to be ranking or listing a bunch of shows in the order that I like them anymore. Instead this year, what I thought would be more fun and more interesting is to turn this into a full-blown award show, complete with a plethora of different categories and one very talented host to lead you along the way. The unique thing about this award show, though, compared to the ones that you've likely already seen for 2024, is that this one is all about my personal experiences. That means there will of course be plenty of things that did actually come out in 2024, but it also means that I can include literally anything that I experienced throughout the entire year, regardless of when it came out. I can include this 3-episode OVA about paper superpowers that came out in 2001. I can include this ancient nature documentary from 1999. I can even include the classic 1996 PlayStation rhythm game, Parappa the Rapper. That's how you know we're not messing around here.
You gotta do what? I gotta believe!
And that leads me into the other difference with this year's video compared to previous ones. This award show will not be exclusive to anime. It turns out I actually consume other media than Japanese animation, and you probably have noticed me trying to sneak in other mediums in the past, and I said, you know what? No more sneaking, let's just include everything, because I want to give some shoutouts to even the non-anime related things that I went through in 2024. I have a ton of different categories to go through here, so timestamps will be down below if you want to skip between any of them, and all of it will eventually lead to the final category of what I consider to be the best of everything from this entire year. It will still mostly be a lot of anime though, so don't get too disappointed. Now that I've stalled for time like a good host does, here is my best of everything awards for 2024. Coming up first is the Animation of the Year category. As you are probably aware, I didn't actually make too many videos in 2024. But out of the ones that I did make, I would say almost every single one had to do with the production of what I was talking about in some way. I'm a big fan of animation, I'm a big fan of the people who make that animation, and I had the pleasure of watching a lot of really well animated things throughout the entire year. Now, if you actually watched any of those videos, then you know that I loved the animation in things like One Piece Fan Letter or Freerun. I think those two are truly some of the best animated offerings that we received this entire year. However, that doesn't even scratch the surface of how many Sakuga explosions we were blessed with in 2024. For as much shit as I give Uma Musume, the beginning of a new era movie was a transcendent animation experience. Too Many Losing Heroines was gorgeous beyond belief, Solo Leveling had some very cool fights, even Girls Band Cry. I know it's still cool to hate on CGI for some reason, but Toei popped off with a CG production that I would compare even to the legendary Studio Orange. Excellent production, excellent aesthetic. But the two that I really want to highlight from 2024 are Dungeon Meshi and Sound Euphonium Season 3. These were two of my favorite anime that came out this year, and being the production whore that I am, the animation played no small part in that. The reason I bring them up together though is because I find it interesting how beautiful they are in completely different ways. Dungeon Meshi, of course, has that patented trigger flair to it that is just so wonderfully cartoony and expressive and over the top. While Sound Euphonium Season 3 is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. It's about as refined and elegant and stunning a production that I've ever seen a TV anime have. Kyoto Animation are masters, Sound Euphonium is the GOAT, and that's still the case here. But talking about anime that actually came out in 2024 is just one side of this discussion, because I also happen to watch a lot of anime that didn't come out this year that also happened to be really goddamn well animated. Akebi's sailor uniform has all of the previously mentioned refinement and elegance of a Kyoto Animation project without actually being animated by Kyoto Animation. Gundam Unicorn was just spectacular, immaculate, probably the best looking Gundam that's ever been made. And I even finally managed to watch Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken, a series that is literally about a bunch of students who are making their own anime. I know I'm late to the party on that one, but seriously, if you love animation like I do, you cannot afford to miss it. However, ultimately, when I think about what impressed me the most with its animation and with its passion to that animation, more than anything else that I've said so far, it has to be Look Back, man. Now, I know you've probably heard every possible positive statement that can be made about this movie, but I really do think that for a film that is all about art and finding the motivation to make art, the best thing that you can say about Look Back is that that message comes through the animation. It feels rough, it feels personal, it feels like everything about this movie was done in a way that was intended by the entire team. One of the most interesting aspects about Look Back's production is that the director insisted keeping the final animation as close to the key animation as possible. Typically in anime production, you have an animation director that goes over all of the key animation and corrects drawings in order to keep the overall aesthetic and the overall design as consistent as possible. But in Look Back, the animation is presented in a way where they wanted each animator's quirks and imperfections and personal touches to stay intact by the final pass. This is a movie that celebrates that human drive to make art, and it does so with the best animation that I saw from last year. To jump off of animation, let's talk about Direction of the Year. I wanted to make Direction of the Year a separate category because, one, I just find direction a lot more interesting to talk about and just a lot more appealing as a viewer of media. But it's also something that is more attainable within a production. A lot of productions aren't going to have the resources to just toss insane animators at every single corner, but a good director and a good storyboard artist can still make a production look really goddamn good, even when you're not being blown away by Sakuga every 5 seconds. A good example of that is something that I watched this year called Tomorrow's Naja. This is a 50-episode drama series produced by Toei Animation back in the mid-2000s, and what's particularly relevant to me is that the team who helmed this is the same team who helmed Oja Majo Doremi. If you watched last year's recap video, then you'll probably know that Doremi is really goddamn good, to put it lightly, one of my favorite anime of all time. And something Doremi excelled at that transfers over to Naja is the sheer directorial talent that is scattered across this entire series. This isn't an animation showcase by any means, and yet you'll find these absolutely gorgeous episodes of Naja directed by Igarashi, directed by Yamauchi, directed by the legendary Mamoru Hosoda, all of these same directors who made incredible Doremi episodes, now making Naja this beautiful looking series as well, that just showcases how goddamn good a series can look when you have a good director at the helm. Some other directorial highlights that stood out to me this year are SSSS Dynazenon. Just like Gridman, Akira Amemiya is genuinely one of the greatest directors working in the industry right now. There was also Heike Monogatari. I didn't quite connect to this series the way that I wanted to, but it's Naoko Yamada, another one of my favorite directors. Seriously, you would be insane to watch this series and not think that it is incredibly well crafted. Paranoia Agent, Princess Tutu, Kamichu. I'm trying to avoid too much overlap here, but I did watch plenty of well-directed things in 2024. But if you know me, if you know the last thing that I made a video on, you know that the best directed thing of 2024 could only go to one thing. It's One Piece fan letter, baby. There is currently a near 40-minute video on the channel talking about why I think One Piece fan letter is one of the greatest things that I have experienced in a long time. And I truly do think that without Megumi Ishitani's historic directorial talent, this never could have been as good as it is. She is just a master of her craft. She's one of the greatest to ever do it, and I'm basically on the edge of my seat right now, waiting to see if she'll direct the next One Piece movie. I'm hoping it happens. I'm hoping we'll see that soon. But I've talked at length about One Piece fan letter already, so to cheat a bit here and give a second Direction of the Year award to something that I haven't talked about on the channel yet, we need to go all the way back to 2006 for a little series called Ouran High School Host Club. Ouran is one of those shows that I have always been meaning to watch, and I finally found the perfect motivation to do it in 2024. You see, Ouran is directed by the director of Ojamajo Doremi. Unless you have short-term memory loss, then you'll recall that we just talked about this man when we were talking about Tomorrow's Naja. Call me biased all you want, but Takuya Igarashi is without a doubt top 3 anime directors of all time for me. He is a legend. He's so prolific, chances are you've seen a series from him yourself. And the interesting thing about Ouran is that it was his first work after leaving Toei and joining Studio Bones. When you look at Ouran, it has all of the DNA and experience that he had established while he was working at Toei. You can feel the comedy and the entertainment from his work on Doremi, but you can also feel the elegance and femininity from stuff like Naja or Sailor Moon. It's this wonderful combination that plays out so well. I absolutely loved Ouran High School Host Club, and if I was ignoring specials like One Piece Fan Letter, it was probably the best directed piece of media that I had the pleasure of watching this year. Up next, we have my Manga of the Year award, and this one might as well not even be an award because I really didn't read too many manga last year. I did read a ton of One Piece. I did finally read A Silent Voice, both excellent manga, both a great time. But the reason I wanted to have this award is to shout out a short, strange, relatively unknown manga that I discovered called Criminal. Criminal is a comedy series about this kid who is literally a crime magnet. From the day he was born, this guy attracts basically every kind of criminal under the sun, and lo and behold, once he transfers to his new school, it turns out that he's in a class made for criminals. From there, what you have here is just a really silly and fun and surprisingly heartfelt story about how he forms friendships and relationships with all of these criminals around him and the various shenanigans that they all end up getting into. It's really short, I wish it was longer, I wish it had an anime, but even despite all that, it's such a fun read, and I do highly recommend it. This next one is going to be a little weird, because ordinarily in these kinds of awards, you're also going to want to give a bunch of genre awards out, right? Action, comedy, adventure, all the usual suspects. However, I don't have that kind of time. You don't have that kind of time. And if I'm being honest here, there just weren't a lot of genres that I really have many standouts to talk about, at least not without overlapping into other categories. So what I'm going to do here is take 2 genres that I do have standouts to talk about that don't overlap much, and we'll just leave it at that. How's that sound? Up first is actually my horror of the year. Now, I've been on record saying that I don't think I've ever seen good horror in anime. That is to say, I have seen good anime that also happen to be horror, but I don't think I've ever seen horror executed well in anime in a way that actually frightened me. I think maybe one of the Shiki OVAs, I think of Flip Flappers episode 5, those are probably the closest I've ever been to actually being scared while watching an anime series. However, that all changed in 2024. Toonami's 4-episode adaptation of Junji Ito's Uzumaki is not what I'm referring to. That shit sucked. What I'm actually referring to is a different 4-episode OVA that released all the way back in 2001 called Alien 9. Without giving anything away or spoiling what this series is actually about, I can say this is without a doubt the scariest and most unsettling anime series that I have ever personally seen. And it's not so much scary in that it's constantly jump scaring you or making you scream with fear with overwhelming terror. It's more of a slow building dread that continues seeping under your skin as this story unfolds and you learn about what's actually going on here. Fullmetal Alchemist and Healer Girl director Yasuhiro Irie is just a master of creating these really tense, intimate, uncomfortable scenes that really leave an impression and still flash in my mind almost a year after I've seen it. There is a lot more to say about Alien 9, but if you just want a quality, actually scary horror anime, then you need to check this one out. To now jump over to an entirely different end of the spectrum, let's talk about the best idol series that I watched in 2024. Yay! If you know me, you know that I am a big fan of certain idol shows. Not all, definitely not all, don't just pen me as the idol guy, but when they're done well, just like anything, an idol series can really reach into your heart and be incredibly satisfying. And surprisingly, I actually watched a lot of idol shit throughout all of 2024. Love Live Superstar Season 3 was fine, I guess. Definitely better than Season 2, but let's be honest, anything was going to be better than Season 2. There was Wake Up Girls, a new IP created in the mid-2010s by the original director of Lucky Star. That one was weird because it was trying to rip off Idolmaster 2011, but without any of the actual heart, charm, soul, expertise, brilliance, mastery, life-changing qualities that Idolmaster 2011 had. So that was a major disappointment for me, especially considering this guy directed one of my favorite anime that I watched last year. On the flip side of that mediocrity though, I did watch 2 idol series in 2024 that actually stood out to me in a really great way. Oshi no Ko is a series that I don't really need to expand on at this point. This is Baby's first idol series. I feel like this is the first series that actually got the mainstream audience to take idols relatively seriously. You know what it is, you know what it does well, but it was catching up to season 2 where Oshi no Ko really impressed me with its Tokyo Blade arc. Everything good about Oshi no Ko's character writing and climactic flourishes is just at its absolute best within this Tokyo Blade arc. Just absolutely spectacular in every possible way. But despite what this award is actually for, Oshi no Ko is not really about idols at all. In fact, ironically, very little of Oshi no Ko focuses on the actual idol aspect. It's a much more entertainment, TV-oriented story in a way where I actually struggle to even refer to it as an idol series to begin with. So for my idol series of the year, I'm actually going to pivot and give it to a different series, an actual bona fide idol series called Idolish 7. Now, your average viewer already doesn't respect idol anime to begin with, but that takes on an even higher tier of discrimination when we start getting into male idol series. What is happening here? Why am I watching this? Am I gay? Well, as it turns out, Idolish 7 is actually one of the better idol series that I've seen, and it all comes down to how this series actually portrays idols in the industry. One of the biggest things I always roll my eyes at is watching stuff like Wake Up Girls or even Oshi no Ko, and the view on idols in the entertainment industry is just so overwhelmingly pessimistic and cynical. These creators are determined to make you believe that being an idol is actually the worst thing in the entire world, and you should feel bad for even supporting them. Idolish 7 takes a more nuanced approach where it really explores both the good and the bad sides of idol fandom. It does show the negatives that come with it, but it also shows the exceeding highs as well, the joys and the pleasures that would make someone want to enter this industry in the first place. I don't know if it would convert anyone who just absolutely hates idols, but if you do see the value in them, if you do have the capability to like an idol story, I think Idolish 7 is a good one to invest your time in. Up next is my Discussion of the Year category. Now, ordinarily, you would think that this would go to the best thing that I enjoyed discussing on YouTube, the stuff that I did episode reviews on, the stuff that I talked about to an audience. Well, that didn't happen much this year, but as most of you probably already know, I have a Discord server that I shill pretty frequently, and I talk in there about the stuff that I'm watching and the stuff that I'm playing pretty much all the time. And the thing that I enjoyed discussing most this year on there, the thing that I had the most fun following along with and talking about it with all of my community, had to be Dungeon Meshi, dude. Dungeon Meshi is one of those shows that I think I only saw maybe 1 or 2 people who were not actually enjoying it. 99% of anybody who was watching this series was just having a blast, keeping up with it and talking about it with everybody else. I myself loved Dungeon Meshi. I would probably say that it is second place if I was ranking the anime that actually came out in 2024. The characters were so lovable, the comedy was hilarious, Trigger was doing the Lord's work with the animation, the story and world building were surprising and in-depth, almost Made in Abyss-like in some ways. It was just the kind of series that had a lot of ingredients that I think appealed to a lot of people, and I really had so much fun following Dungeon Meshi week by week, whether it was a gag-filled comedy episode or if it was a heavy, dark, suspenseful lore drop episode. It all worked. It was unbelievably fun talking about it with everybody on the Discord, and I can't wait for Season 2 to have that discussion come back again. Now strap in for a long one, because up next, we are going to be talking about Soundtrack of the Year. And this is such a colossal category, such a gargantuan task sorting through all of the best music that I heard in 2024, that I actually have to split this up into 2 subcategories. One is the best anime soundtrack that I heard in 2024, and 2 is the best video game soundtrack. What makes a good video game and anime soundtrack can be very different, so I think it's pretty fitting to split them up like this. On the anime side, if I were to list out the best soundtracks that I've heard come from this year alone, it would either be the previously mentioned Dungeon Meshi, or the critically acclaimed, highly beloved Frieren. Ironically, despite both of these series being centered around a fantasy setting, their soundtracks are very distinct and different from one another. Dungeon Meshi has a very classic, whimsical JRPG sound to it, and that's because it was created by the legendary video game composer Yasunori Mitsuda. This guy has such a strong understanding of how to make a melody that's catchy, but also music that is very context sensitive and fits within specific frameworks. This is a relatively massive 80+ track OST, and I really do think Dungeon Meshi's soundtrack went under the radar for how good it is. The instrumentation, the soundstage, just the melodies in general, seriously, listen to this soundtrack on its own when you have a chance, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. What didn't go under the radar, though, was Frieren's soundtrack. Helmed by the very popular and beloved Evan Call, Frieren has a much more grounded approach to its take on fantasy. It feels more folklore-y, it feels historical, and it feels goddamn epic. I think the reason why Frieren's soundtrack stood out to people the way that it did isn't just because the soundtrack itself was excellent, but it's because it's perfectly in tune with the actual anime series. Evan Call literally composed these songs to be synced perfectly to individual scenes. And what that means is you have these legendary, climactic moments scattered throughout the story where the music is brought to the forefront in a way that is completely planned and completely deliberate. There's no exaggerating this. Literally every single time this happens, it takes you off your goddamn feet. I love both of these soundtracks to death. I might lean a little bit more toward Frieren, but really, it's very hard to choose for me. Thankfully, I don't have to choose because that's only one piece of the puzzle here. I watched a lot of anime that didn't come out in 2024, and believe it or not, had even better soundtracks. Starting off, I talk a lot of shit on Hiroyuki Sawano. Now don't get me wrong, this guy has earned his legend status. He's worked on a lot of soundtracks that I do really enjoy. However, he's also reached the point where you see him on something like Solo Leveling, and you find it hard to believe that he even touched the soundtrack for that series. It's just so forgettable. He's had a string of those kinds of OSTs recently where I really thought the man might have lost his touch. But this year, I happened to watch something that renewed my faith in Sawano, something that made me love him more than I ever had before. And that something was Gundam Unicorn. Gundam Unicorn might just be my new favorite Gundam that I have ever watched, period. This is the shit that makes watching all of the mediocrity in Universal Century Gundam actually worth it. And among the things that I think it does really well, near the top of that list would be its absolutely superb Hiroyuki Sawano soundtrack. Gundam Unicorn has the best Sawano OST that I have ever personally heard. Better than Attack on Titan, better than 86, better than Promare. It is the best work that he has ever made in my opinion. I'm sorry. And you know what? I'm not even going to elaborate. Just watch the series, better yet, just listen to Unicorn on YouTube. You will get it. I also happened to go on a huge Ghibli spree throughout 2024 as well, which meant listening to a ton of one of my favorite composers in the industry, the legendary Joe Hisaishi. These are classics for a reason, you don't need to hear me say anything about them, but the soundtracks definitely played no small part in that. And if I had to pick just one, probably Ponyo. That underwater motif is just made specifically for me, but they're all just really, really good. I could mention others like Hirano's legendary work on Orin, Yamada's legendary work on Vinland Saga Season 2, but enough stalling, okay? There were a lot of good ones, but overall, if I were to just say flat out what the best anime soundtrack that I heard in 2024 was, it would come down to these two music-based classics that I finally had the opportunity to watch. Your Lie in April has reached a level of mainstream popularity and staying power that I think it's kind of just become cool to hate on it, to be a contrarian and say it was never actually that good. I have friends who both loved it and didn't love it, so I wasn't entirely sure what to expect when I entered the series. But what I got was one of the best uses of music as a storytelling tool that I have ever personally seen. This is not simply a soundtrack. This isn't just recording these classical pieces and putting them on show for everyone to enjoy. Your Lie in April consistently and thoroughly tells a story with every single performance that it puts to screen. You'll have these incredibly long and intricate pieces that are not only visually and musically very impressive, but they're also constantly unraveling the characters who are playing them and telling compelling narratives and scenes entirely through the music. There's such a strong sense of intent and passion with how these performances are made, and this theme that Your Lie in April keeps coming back to, this theme of drive and motivation in your creative pursuits, it really resonated with me in a way that few other shows did this year. That was not my favorite anime soundtrack of 2024 though. I don't know if I've ever publicly said this on my YouTube channel, but my favorite anime composer of all time is Yoko Kanno. She's a composer who I truly think represents the peak of what music in fiction can actually be. Watch Cowboy Bebop, watch Terror and Resonance, watch Escaflown, watch Standalone Complex, Wolf's Rain. I'm not being hyperbolic here. She does not miss on any of her soundtracks. She is the definition of an icon who I will watch entire series for just to get another taste of her work. And this year, I went back to a classic Shinichiro Watanabe series to get that taste again with Kids on the Slope. Now, Kids on the Slope by itself, I honestly didn't really enjoy that much. The story and the characters and how everything progressed by the end, it didn't really work for me. It was kind of frustrating. But the one bright spot in all of this is that it has yet another historic soundtrack to add to Yoko Kanno's portfolio. Kids on the Slope is all about jazz. It's about these two students that come together to play jazz, and the soundtrack that results from that is one that follows that freeform ideology that jazz encompasses. It's playful and it's energetic, but it can also be solemn and lonely. Paired with Shinichiro Watanabe's immaculate direction, you have these scenes and performances that, in a vacuum, are so memorable and so impactful that you almost wish they were part of a different series altogether. It's such a special soundtrack, I really could not do it justice even if I wanted to, and it was the best anime soundtrack that I heard in 2024. Now that we're finally finished with anime soundtracks, I hope you realize why I split this up now. Let's talk about some goddamn video games, man. Now, I've never really checked how much of my audience is actually comprised of gamers, but I can tell you personally that I myself play a lot of video games. And the thing about video games is that I truly do think out of any entertainment medium, games often have some of the best soundtracks that media has to offer. They can be more ambitious, they can be more experimental, they can integrate them in more interesting ways. I know these things aren't actually limited to video games exclusively, but video games are where I find those qualities show up more often. Take an old game that I played for the first time this year, Katamari Damacy. This has one of the best video game soundtracks that I have ever heard, but the cool part about it is that it might as well just be a standalone album of an array of different sounding songs. You could release this completely separate from the game itself, and I think all of the magic and charm in these songs would still be fully felt just listening to this amazing music. On the opposite side of that coin, you have a game like Hi-Fi Rush, a rhythm-based action game where the music is intrinsically tied to the cutscenes and the gameplay itself. Not only are they repurposing existing music within this new framework, but you also have a ton of original bangers in here that work just as well and keep adding to that feeling of momentum and action. Point is, video game music tends to see a lot more creative use, both in terms of the actual music itself, but also how it's used within the experience. And I really did experience a lot of great video game soundtracks this year. Metaphor ReFantazio is another Shoji Meguro masterclass. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake took a personal favorite video game OST and made it 10 times better. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk kept the Jet Set Radio soul alive with its indie-filled track list of fire. Penny's Big Breakaway brought the T-Lopes greatness back to our screens. Astrobot, Cuphead, Chained Echoes, so many great soundtracks, so little time. But really, there was never even a question in my mind what this award was actually going to go to. The best game soundtrack that I heard this year was not only the best soundtrack that I heard period this year, even if I was including anime, it also just might be my favorite video game OST of all time. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a very special video game for many different reasons, but it's this soundtrack that I keep coming back to, even almost a year after I finished it. To say that this soundtrack is large in scope would be an understatement of criminal proportions. You cannot go 2 seconds in this game without hearing a brand new piece of music that these creators have made for you. When I talked about context-sensitive soundtracks back in the anime section, this is just about the gold standard for that approach to composing. Every minute detail in this game was treated with a musical care that I have never seen before while playing a video game. The soundtrack is so large that they released a 200+ track OST, and that was not even a fourth of the tracks that are actually in this game. There is a single 10-second bench break in the middle of a boss fight that has its own track that you will never hear again. And of course, for no reason, it's an absolute banger. The scope is simply unbelievable in a way where you really do have to just play it in order to understand. However, it's not just quantity that the soundtrack has. This OST is absolutely brilliant. If my favorite anime composer is Yoko Kanno, then my favorite video game composer, without a doubt, is Nobuo Uematsu. And Rebirth takes all of those original Final Fantasy VII tracks that he made and remixes, rearranges, and expands on them in a way that completely elevates the original musical experience. So much variety, so much care, the boss fights, the story sequences, the locations you visit. There is not an inch of this game that the soundtrack doesn't elevate in some way. And it is by far the soundtrack that I felt most privileged to listen to in 2024. Following up all that, if you'll allow me to talk about music for just one moment longer, I want to give out an honorary Music Video of the Year award as well. And I say honorary because there's only 2 things that I really even want to talk about here. The first is Chocolate Kadabra. Lot, I don't know how you pronounce it, but there's this chocolate brand in Japan that has a history producing some of the greatest music videos every single year for Valentine's Day to sell their chocolate. I think about Baby I Love You Daze, I think about Heart Forecast. I know most of you have probably seen at least one of these. They're music videos that have such bangers and have such talent who craft them into something great. And they lived up to that yet again this year with Chocolate Kadabra. When you combine Ado's incredible music talent with Studio Trigger and Yo Yoshinari himself helming this entire thing, you're basically getting a long-awaited Little Witch Academia sequel that happens to revolve around chocolate. It's excellent, go watch it if you haven't seen it, but the actual music video of the year that I want to talk about fittingly ties back to one of my favorite franchises of all time. In 2025, the Idolmaster property happened to launch its newest juggernaut with Gakuen Idolmaster. Now, Bandai Namco has a history of being the worst company in the universe. I don't think there's a single person out there who actually likes Bandai Namco. And they have a history of poorly releasing and marketing many Idolmaster properties. However, Gakuen Idolmaster seems like all of those ancient, decrepit executives got tossed out of the company and is now being run by people who actually know what they're doing. Gakuen Idolmaster has had a pretty legendary marketing campaign for this year one of their service, and part of that marketing campaign has been a string of pretty consistently released music videos for every single character that are genuinely really goddamn good. What you have here is a combination of the kind of musical talent that Idolmaster is able to bring to the table. Incredible productions from people like Giga and Minami. But on the visual side, what's been cool about Gakuen is that it's been bringing really interesting and fresh indie talent to actually produce the music videos for all of these characters. What that means is you have these weird, experimental, awesome little productions made by these people who I'm sure will be much bigger in the industry going forward. However, if I have to give the award to one music video in particular, it has to be one of the most recent ones made for Seina Juo, composed by the iconic Go Shina, called Tiny Ambition. It's a feast for the ears, it's a feast for the eyes. I'm not going to say anything else about this, just that Go Shina is one of my favorite composers in the industry for a reason. You probably love his work as well if you've seen Demon Slayer, and Seina will be the first character that I produce when I finally get to play Gakuen Idolmaster. I'm sure that global release is coming any day now. Speaking of global, I want to talk about my experience of the year. Despite being the media junkie that I am, I've been trying to make an effort to actually touch grass and get out in the world and go places that I've always wanted to go. If you watch my videos, then you already know about the Japan trips that I've done in the past, just life-changing experiences. I'll never forget them. I'm already planning to go back. However, one place that I've always wanted to go, even before I was a weeaboo obsessed with Japan, is Venice, baby. It's one of those locations that everyone just kind of says, yeah, it'd be cool to go there someday. I saw it in all of my geography books growing up. I saw it in Aria. I saw it in One Piece. I needed to go there. I needed to make that someday today. So I scheduled my flight, I packed my bags, I got to Venice, and it was all right. Now, don't get me wrong, Venice is beautiful. It's such a cool place. It's easy to just wander around these back corners, take in the sights, eat some hella good pizza, hella good ice cream. It's great, but it's also really small. Now, I did no research on Venice at all before I left, and I had planned on staying there for 2 weeks. And within 2 days, I felt like I had already seen most of what was interesting to me. It definitely didn't have that Japan effect where no matter how much time I spent there, it felt like there was never going to be enough to see everything that I wanted to see. I felt like I saw pretty much everything that I wanted to see when I was in Venice. This story isn't done yet though. I made some change of plans midway through, booked a train in Venice, and made my way down to Rome. Contrary to Venice, This is the kind of place that you can spend weeks. The Vatican, the Colosseum, all of these landmarks and hidden corners of the city. It felt like this place never slept. Everyone was loud, everyone was abrasive. My Uber drivers made me feel like I was in a Mission Impossible car chase. This shit was about as memorable as you can get. However, the most memorable parts for me weren't even the city itself as much as it was the people that I got to meet and the weird happenings that I experienced. For one, this was about as scuffed a makeshift trip as you could expect. I booked an Airbnb that I didn't realize was 40 minutes outside the city by train with very infrequent stops and cycles. I missed that same Airbnb on that same train because I was standing next to a door that had a sign written in a language that I could not understand that said it was inoperable. I spent 2.5 hours walking to that Airbnb from the next stop and literally destroyed my shoes and had to buy new ones in the city. I don't want you to get the wrong idea here. I am so happy that I went through all that. I'm glad that I got to experience that because I got to see so many things that I wouldn't have otherwise. The woman who ran that Airbnb was just the sweetest woman ever. The walk that I had to take to get to that Airbnb put me through so many cool spots on the outskirts of Rome that I never would have seen otherwise. It's one of those accidental experiences and encounters that you just can't plan or replicate. It's a nice reminder to just take life as it comes to you. However, my favorite moment, without a doubt, was meeting up with my good friend and fellow YouTuber, Artur. This guy took a flight out to Rome when he realized I was going to be out there, and he showed me around, he bought me ice cream. It was the best. I love you, dude. Overall, I wouldn't say Rome or even Italy itself was quite as compatible with who I am as a person as Japan was, but it was still an unforgettable journey, a lifelong wish of mine come true, and it was the experience that I think back on the most fondly in 2024. Okay, so we're nearing the end now. We're nearing the final, ultimate categories of the year for the best of the best. But allow me one concession here. I typically don't make really negative videos. Every so often I will break out one, but for the most part, I'm someone who likes to focus more on the stuff that I do like, the stuff that I love, the stuff that I'm passionate about. But I'm still human, alright? I need to vent my frustration sometimes, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in the worst of the year category. I watched some bad stuff this year, and I'm not letting any of it get away scot-free. The only problem is that it is a bit tough because I want to separate my feelings of disappointment from something just being straight up bad. For example, I watched a long heard about magical girl classic this year called Princess Tutu. Now, I hear this brought up all the time in magical girl discussions. I hear it when Doremi is discussed, I hear it when Precure is discussed. In my circles, it's one of those things that you just can't avoid. And I didn't like it, man. I didn't like Princess Tutu. This series has a great start and a great end, but just a bunch of nothingness in between those 2 points. Was it terrible? No, I wouldn't say that, but was I underwhelmed? Absolutely. The same sentiment goes for a video game that I finally played this year after having it on my planning list for who knows how long, called Radiant Historia. This is a cult classic JRPG that has rabid fans that constantly tell you that this game is a masterpiece. This is the best time travel RPG that's ever been made. Chrono Trigger be damned! But it just wasn't that good, man. It had cool ideas, there's a really cool core and mechanic to this game, but the characters and the story itself were just so dry, so uninteresting. Again, it wasn't terrible, but just very underwhelming considering my expectations. But that isn't even getting into the bad stuff. And I know I'm about to make a lot of people very angry here, so I'm going to just blitz through this as fast as I reasonably can while saying what I didn't like. As one of the biggest Gridman shills there is, I hated Gridman Universe. This movie is complete, incoherent nonsense. It's missing all of the heart that Gridman and Dynazenon had. I really don't know what happened here. I don't know what people see in this movie. In that same vein, there's also Weathering With You. I don't want to say this is one of the worst anime movies that I've ever seen, but it really might be one of the worst anime movies that I've ever seen. I'm sorry, Shinkai fans. I'm not a Shinkai hater. I love Your Name. But this whole movie is like the concept phase of a story that was never actually fleshed out. There's so many characters and subplots that go nowhere, half-baked romance, phony sentimentality, and my god, dude, the third act of this movie, I can't even talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Hopefully, I'll be back next year after watching some more Shinkai movies, talking about how much better they are. People will tell you that Solo Leveling is just stupid popcorn fun that you stuff yourself with. Don't take it too seriously, just have fun. But the problem is that there isn't enough popcorn there. You have to sit through 2 to 3 episodes of the most boring, uninteresting self-insert shonen stories that I have ever seen before you finally get to another cool fight that hooks you back in. It's not enough. There's one cool episode near the end. I will not be watching season 2. And finally, Uma Musume, man. Horse girls. I will go on record saying that season 2 of Uma Musume is good. Really good at parts. I was crying so hard in that finale. But the framework that Uma Musume operates in is incredibly limited. There's only so many ways that you can make horse injures its leg into an interesting storyline. And with Uma Musume beginning of a new era, they've recycled that same plot point for the 5th time in a row. And I'm just so done with it, man. It doesn't help that this is easily the weakest, least charismatic, least interesting cast that Uma has followed since season 1. But what's most frustrating about it is that the care being put into the presentation is so undeserving of this core. You have Ken Yamamoto's feature directorial debut here, one of the most beautiful looking animated movies that released this entire year, being put on this nothing burger of a story. It's so disappointing, it's so irritating, and I really don't know how many more Uma Musumes I have left in me. Thank you for letting me get all of that off of my chest. I don't expect anyone to agree with me or even understand where I'm coming from. I just needed to talk about it. But there's one thing in particular that I have been saving to talk about. Ever since I finished it, I knew there was no way I would watch something worse than this in 2024. It would be a feat to find something that I hate more than this ever. I'm not even joking here. The Flowers of Evil is, for lack of a better word, painful. I cannot fittingly describe in words how much I hated watching every single second of this series. I had to push myself through every single episode. And the only thing stopping me from dropping it midway through is how much I hated myself for putting it down as one of the goals that I wanted to finish in 2024. The premise of this series is that this pseudo-intellectual in high school has a crush on this girl. And what happens is he ends up sniffing her gym uniform in secret and is caught by another girl who ends up using that as blackmail to turn this guy into a disgusting pervert. Now, I'm sure that already sounds kind of weird and kind of gross, but the premise itself isn't the issue with this series. The issue is how that premise plays out. This series flip-flops between being some of the most insufferable and nonsensical garbage that I have ever seen, and the other side being an insanely boring and insanely padded, pretentious ego fest. Now, you can probably tell already that they went for a very strange and experimental approach for this adaptation. It's all rotoscoped over real-life actors. It's meant to be unsettling. It's meant to be ambitious. This is the work of an auteur. And the problem with that is I really do think whoever made this anime had an insanely inflated ego and thought they were making something artistic. They thought they were doing something brilliant when they had an episode open with a 6-minute scene of characters just walking. Just walking with no dialogue, no sounds, nothing. 6 full, uninterrupted minutes. This is not deep. This is not insightful or engaging or clever. This doesn't tell me anything about the story or the characters. It is just so unbelievably pretentious, self-important, and diabolical, man. How dare you? The thing about this series is that it's actually an adaptation of a very loved and very well-respected manga. I've heard nothing but good things about this source material. So, is that manga better than the anime? I mean, yeah, probably. I honestly have no doubt in my mind. But this adaptation was just so bad in every possible way that it's killed even the tiniest possibility that I would ever read it in the future. It was just excruciating. Stay far, far away from this abomination. I'm not even sorry for any of the things that I'm saying. This was, without question, the worst thing that I watched in 2024. We're in the final stretch now, the final categories that kind of encapsulate the best of what I went through in 2024. We're going to end here with my movie of the year, my game of the year, my anime of the year, and finally, of course, what I considered to be the best of everything this entire year. Let's start in those with movies. We've got a lot of good stuff in here. I actually started out my year by going to the first Western theater release of the second Gurren Lagann movie. Guys, this movie is goddamn incredible. I've actually wanted to make a video about this movie for a long time. If you've only seen the ending of Gurren Lagann in the TV release, you need to watch this movie as soon as possible. It is the definitive ending to Gurren Lagann's story. That was incredible. What else have we got in here? Look Back. You don't need me to tell you Look Back's great, but it's great. Same with Inuo, just classic Yuasa goodness. I've also been on a kind of scuffed marathon recently to finally watch every single Ghibli movie. Before this year, I had actually only seen 2 or 3 Ghibli movies in my entire life. And I wanted to really dive in this year and see what the deal is with this Miyazaki guy. Arrietty, Howl, Ponyo, Grave of the Fireflies, Kiki. God, I loved Kiki. But my 2 favorites out of the Ghibli movies that I watched were definitely Nausicaa and Princess Mononoke. Nausicaa is like the kind of fantasy that I wish writers would actually try to write more often in the current day. It's such a unique setting, the world and the culture and the machinations are palpable. Nausicaa herself is a great character. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful movie. But even more than Nausicaa, I have to say that I absolutely loved Princess Mononoke, man. I know this is the one that everybody loves. I felt like Frank in Always Sunny finally sitting down to watch this cinematic experience. I get it, guys. I finally get it. Princess Mononoke is a movie that I would show somebody as an example of just pristine characterization. There's so many little details in the dialogue, in the animation and the mannerisms, in the storytelling itself. Everything is feeding into giving you a perfect look into all of these different characters. Despite there being a pretty overt and unsympathetic conflict that happens in this movie, I loved how the sides themselves weren't so clear-cut or obvious. You hear that kind of thing said a lot, but it really did feel like everyone in the movie had their own personality and motivation that was driving them through the story, and that ends up making the twists and turns and the ultimate progression of the movie that much more compelling. But if we're talking about my actual favorite movie of the year, then we have to dive over to the live action side and actually dive into Hollywood, where they occasionally make really good things. Now, I think throughout this video, you've probably learned a few things about my taste. You've learned about my favorites and just the things that I really love. I think I've used of all time to describe at least 10 different things by now. So, since it's relevant to this category and what I'm about to talk about, I feel like you should know that Mad Max Fury Road is my favorite movie of all time. There's not many things, even among my favorites, that I can look at and objectively say that it is 100% perfect. But Mad Max Fury Road is among that list. This is the greatest movie that has ever been put to film. The action and spectacle, the heart and the core of the characters and story, the practical cinematography, the post-effects work, the editing, the music. I really can't do justice to Mad Max Fury Road. I've seen this movie more times than I can count. It's a masterpiece. And I say all of this because after more than a decade, George Miller had the audacity to release a prequel movie to Mad Max Fury Road focused on Furiosa. Now, I'm not going to even pretend that Furiosa is near Mad Max Fury Road's quality. But you have to understand, even being half as good as Mad Max Fury Road puts you above most films that have ever been made. And Furiosa is still a damn good movie, and most importantly for me, doesn't just feel like a copy of Fury Road. You still have all of the Fury Road hallmarks, the action and spectacle and cinematography, they're all absolutely immaculate as you would hope, but the story is interesting because it's so much slower and more methodical. You're following Furiosa through multiple stages of her life, and you feel the passage of time in a much more deliberate way. Fury Road, that whole movie basically takes place over 2 to 3 days. Furiosa is a lot more willing to take its time to let things breathe in between, and while it does lead to more uneven pacing, I think it helps this movie stand apart and, most importantly, really puts the emphasis on the arc that Furiosa herself goes through. It's a fantastic movie. I wish it did better at the box office. Hollywood, please keep giving George Miller hundreds of millions of dollars to make whatever movie he wants. The guy is a legend. He deserves every bit of it. Game of the Year 2024. Boy, do I have some opinions on this one. Honestly, if I look back on this year, I think I actually played more games than I did watch anime. I mean, what can I say? Gaming's in my blood. And if you want me to cut to the chase and just tell you straight up what the best game I played in 2024 was, it's Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door remake, baby. Thousand Year Door is an ancient video game from my childhood. It's one of the first video games that I ever really fell in love with. It's what I would consider a quintessential RPG. Delightful story, clever, heartfelt, hilarious writing, charming and memorable characters, a fresh and unique world, engaging and incredibly fun turn-based combat, an absolute banger soundtrack. It's got pretty much everything that you could want. This is the kind of RPG that I think really appeals as a gateway to the genre. It just doesn't have any of the usual trappings or slogs that you normally find in these kinds of games, and it's constantly reinventing itself in fun ways. You can go from infiltrating the inner circle of a wrestling corporation on a flying tourist island to solving a burglary whodunit mystery on a high-class business train set for a city inhabited by penguins. This is an easy top 3 video game ever made for me, and in 2024, Nintendo didn't really have much going on, so they said, you know what? Let's do it. Let's finally do what the fans have wanted and bring back classic Paper Mario. It's Thousand Year Door, man. There's not much I can really add at this point. It's a masterpiece. It was always going to be incredible if they stayed faithful, which they did. But the one thing that has significantly changed that I can talk about, and briefly already did earlier in the video, is the newly composed and arranged soundtrack. As I said back then, Thousand Year Door already had one of my favorite video game soundtracks ever. And yet what the team has done here with this remake, with this new version of that soundtrack, is absolutely absurd. So many new tracks composed for individual scenes, custom versions of battle music based on the location you're in, custom versions of the town themes based on the shop you're in. It is a magical audio experience and somehow elevated Thousand Year Door to an even greater height than I could have anticipated. But I have played this game already. I knew pretty much everything that I was going to experience before I even booted it up. I love it to death. I think they did the Lord's work on this remake, but something doesn't feel quite right about saying that this is my game of the year. Instead, I want to focus on 3 other games that came out in 2024 that stood above the rest and were new, unexpected experiences for me. Metaphor ReFantasio is basically fantasy Persona. I hope that says everything I need to about this game. More realistically though, Metaphor is like a cool mix of Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. It feels like both series are influencing the identity of this game, both from a narrative and aesthetic perspective, but also from a gameplay and mechanics one. Now, I'm a big Persona guy. Persona 5, one of my favorite games ever. And Metaphor carries a lot of the DNA that makes those games so addicting and so special. Managing your time, developing your relationships with characters, the way the RPG progression ties into all of that, it's so fun and so rewarding. And in fact, Metaphor makes a strong case as an entry into these Persona-like games. Unlike Persona, where you're largely in these mundane and slice-of-life type settings, Metaphor is in this huge, ambitious, sprawling fantasy world that feels enticing to slowly unravel and travel across. You keep wondering what the next place you visit will be like, or who the next person you meet will be like. It keeps you on your toes in a way that the Persona series can sometimes struggle with. And when I say travel across, I literally mean travel across. One of the coolest aspects about Metaphor is literally riding in a giant mech that travels from location to location and also factors into the time-based system of the game. It really does feel like you yourself are making these long journeys as you cook and talk and sleep in this incredible gauntlet runner. Metaphor was a truly special experience. I loved it so much that I accidentally bought 2 collector's editions of it, and I just can't wait for whatever Atlas cooks up next. The last 2 that I'm going to talk about are weird because if I was giving out a Game of the Year award, I would have a truly difficult time choosing between these 2 games. They're very different and they mean different things for me, and yet both of them are just absolute masterclasses in video games. However, I think it's fitting to start with the game that actually won Game of the Year at Jeff Keighley's annual award show, Astrobot. Not only is Astrobot just an excellent video game, I mean, if you like 3D platformers, if you like classic Marios from Nintendo, you will love this video game. It's like somebody decided to make a third unofficial Super Mario Galaxy game and did it all the justice that you could possibly want. Level design and mechanics are where this game truly shine. You enter a world in this game, and it is not content to stay the same as it was when you entered. It evolves and changes and constantly brings you along for the ride through so many different environments and powers. I have never seen a video game utilize a shrinking mechanic as good as Astrobot does. It is superb. However, I say Astrobot is not only an excellent video game, because I think this game stands for something even more important coming out in the current day. PlayStation has currently had a string of live service failures. The industry as a whole is and has been moving in a much more manufactured and profit-hungry direction. Game production as a whole is taking 7 to 8 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to actually make these AAA games now. The industry is not in a great place. And I think Astrobot coming out now, being so loved, winning Game of the Year among so many prestigious titles, some that costed and took 3 times the amount to make, it sends a message, man. It sends a message to those executives at the top. We want fun video games. They don't always need to be ultra realistic, they don't always need to be 100-hour open world epics, they don't always need to be made by mega teams of hundreds of developers for almost a decade. This is a delightful, charming, 20-hour 3D platformer that everyone loves, and it won Game of the Year. In my opinion, it was the right game for everyone to celebrate in 2024. But if I really look into my heart of hearts and think about the game that floored me the most, made me laugh the most, made me cry the most, made my jaw drop in awe of what I was looking at, it's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, man. Now, this probably seems like a backstab after I talked about 1, not wanting to reward remakes, and 2, not wanting to reward expensive productions made by hundreds of people. But I have to say, FF7 Rebirth is also commendable in its own way. For one, this game was actually made very quickly. After Intergrade released in 2021, they went all in on Rebirth and somehow managed to get this game out in the span of 3 years. That might seem utterly impossible when you look at the scope and the density of this game, but the reason they were able to do it is because they're not firing all of their employees in between games. Would you look at that, Western studios? If you don't fire your developers, they make games more efficiently. All of these guys knew each other, they had familiarity and bonds already, they knew who to go to for the right problems, and it's another example of how video games, even these multi-$100 million ones, benefit so much from the connection between a relatively small group of people. As for the second point though, this is not simply a remake. If you play this game and you have a connection to the original Final Fantasy VII the way that I do, you will still find so many surprises, fresh experiences, and passion for the original that elevates this game in every single way. There's things in the original Final Fantasy VII that I thought there would be no way ever that they could translate it to a modern, high-budget remake. And they fucking did it, man. They did everything a fan could want, and it comes down to knowing what to expand and what to leave as is. Despite my gushing here, I'm actually not a huge fan of the original Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's working with a lot less material, and it always felt like they were padding out something that was never meant to be padded out in that way. Rebirth, on the other hand, not only had a lot more material to work with, but it's also just a lot smarter with where it expands on things. Taking the Junon Parade section and expanding on the minigame there? Excellent. Turning the short boat ride to Costa del Sol into a full Queensblood tournament? Hell yeah. I've seen so many people hate on how many minigames and miscellaneous content is in Rebirth, and yet not only did I love all of it, but that is an integral core of Final Fantasy VII, man. The original was filled with so much bullshit to interact with everywhere. It was great. It's a part of the identity of FF7, and they did such a good job capturing that spirit in Rebirth as well. With all of that being said though, the real triumph in this game is how much more alive the characters feel compared to the original. Having so many more scenes with our cast interacting, playing off of each other, helping and bickering with one another, bonding, it's just so masterfully done in a way that never could have been on the original PS1 game. Cloud alone has such a fulfilling arc and development over the course of the game. Barret, Tifa, Aerith, Red 13, even Yuffie, man. I hate Yuffie in the original, and yet I love her here. This is such a special video game, and if I'm splitting hairs here between Astrobot and this, then my game of the year is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And now it's time for the moment that anyone who clicked on this video probably came here for. Anime of the Year 2024. Now, as you can probably tell by now, I watched a lot of anime in 2024. I watched a lot of stuff that came out this year, I watched a lot of stuff that came out not this year, and it's difficult to narrow it down completely, but if I had to choose just one, Frieren Beyond Journey's End is not my anime of the year. I'm sorry to bait you like that, but I know it's a lot of people's anime of the year, and it's a damn good series, so I don't have any qualms about that. I think what Frieren does so well that has people gravitate towards it is its melding of tones. On one hand, you have a very quiet, peaceful, serene dive into mortality and time. It explores those themes of loss and retrospection and moving forward in a really touching and beautiful way. But on the other side of that, it's somehow able to mix this very ambitious, over-the-top, bombastic, shonen epicness in a way that doesn't feel out of place. It actually complements it. It crescendos these quieter emotional buildups with something triumphant and impactful. Frieren was awesome, man. I'll definitely be there for season 2. But yeah, not my anime of the year. It's tough because there's so many anime here that I would love to talk about for even longer than I already have. Too Many Losing Heroines was so funny, one of the best romance series that I've seen come out in recent memory. Girls Band Cry feels like the first girls band series to actually bring that authentic, rock and roll, who gives a shit attitude to their anime. Akebi's sailor uniform is the kind of overly optimistic world that I wished I lived in. Gundam Unicorn feels like Tomino's vision of new types finally explored the way that they should have been. Orin is the hilarious, charming, lovey-dovey gold standard for all rom-coms to date. There's so many anime I want to talk about here, man. But out of the ones that came out in 2024, there are two specifically that I want to zone in on. And fittingly, they were the two that I brought up all the way at the beginning of this video in Animation of the Year. I've already said a lot about Dungeon Meshi, so I'm not going to harp on about it too much longer. I'm just going to say that this is the kind of series that is made for me. And it all comes down to the heart. Yeah, it's funny as hell. Some of these episodes are so creative in their set pieces and gags. Yeah, the world building and the atmosphere is excellent. This is the kind of series that you show somebody who says fantasy is just isekai slop now. And yeah, the discussion was awesome. Following this series every single week and discussing it with all of my friends was such a memorable experience. But more than anything else, it is the heart of the story and the characters that I think sets this series apart. I fell in love with every single one of this gang. Laios, Marcial, Chilchuk, Senchi, Fallen, every one of them is so distinct and valuable to the story. I fell in love with this dive into the dungeon, this grand search for Fallen. The emotional stakes are palpable. There isn't another series like Dungeon Meshi, and the only way I'm gonna get that satisfaction again is to wait for Season 2. However, as much love as I can give Dungeon Meshi, it still only gets an honorary silver medal out of the stuff that came out this year. Because there's one other series among 2024's offerings that I loved even more. Sound Euphonium is in my top 5 anime ever made. Season 2 is one of the greatest pieces of fiction that's ever been put to screen. And in 2024, this little band anime finally received its third and final season to conclude the story. Sound Euphonium is the kind of series that is very unassuming on the surface. From the outside, it probably looks like just another cute girls doing cute things story, just within a gimmicky school band framework. But I don't think I'm exaggerating here when I say that Sound Euphonium has some of the best writing ever put to anime. And I don't just mean the story, I'm talking about the writing, the dialogue, the way that characters talk and interact with each other. Every character in Sound Euphonium feels so authentic and believable, and that's what makes the story surrounding these characters hit so much harder. In this third season, we've finally reached the final year of school for Kumiko as a character, and I really don't want to ruin this for you guys. I don't want to spoil any aspect of this season or even the series as a whole. So all I'm gonna say is Omae Kumiko has been one of my favorite characters in fiction for almost a decade now. I love this character more than I love some of my own family members. And watching the journey that she's gone through over this series, how she starts in Season 1, who she grows into in Season 2, the steps that she takes in the movies and specials, and finally, where she ends in Season 3. I was sobbing, man. The final episode of Season 3 gives you the kind of catharsis and long-standing fulfillment that will stick with you for the rest of your life. This is the kind of feeling that I desperately search for when I'm watching anime, and it always tells me that what I just watched was an all-time favorite. If I was only looking at anime that came out this year, Sound Euphonium Season 3 would be the easiest anime of the year that I have ever chosen. But you know that's not how we do things here, and there was actually one other thing. Vinland Saga has always been great. Quite a few years ago now, I put Season 1 in some of the best things that I had watched from that entire year. It's just narratively gripping, man. The way the story unfolds is so captivating and so enthralling. It's the kind of series that I think I could recommend to essentially anyone. It's greatness. However, I would say there was one aspect of Vinland Saga Season 1 that did rub me the wrong way when I watched it. It's almost so barbaric that it is a detriment to my enjoyment. You see, the majority of this season, you're following Thorfinn as he strives to kill Aslad and get revenge for the death of his father. It's a great hook into the story, but because you're following these characters very closely throughout, there's very little humanity in a lot of Season 1. You're either rooting for the bloodlusted son who mindlessly obeys Aslad because he thinks it'll give him a chance to kill him later on, or you're rooting for Aslad, who, as charismatic and incredible as he is still a bastard. He's leading a bunch of bastards. Almost everybody in this series is some kind of bastard, and when you rarely come across someone who isn't, they usually die horrible deaths. It always just felt kind of unsettling and difficult to enjoy the characters, even in the midst of how much I was enjoying the series overall. However, by the last stretch of Season 1, the story makes it very clear that all of that was completely deliberate. Vinland Saga wants to take you in the midst of this monstrous era in history and show it to you completely unfiltered so you understand the message that it is trying to get across. Violence is not the answer. You have no enemies in this world. It's such a simple, almost childish message. If I said violence is not the answer to somebody on the street, they'd probably laugh at me. But Vinland Saga really makes you believe it, and by the end of Season 1, I really felt like that message and that theme was what I enjoyed most about the series. Which is why, if I were to say Vinland Saga Season 1 is great, then I would say Season 2, covering the Farmland arc, is now among my top 10 anime of all time. Vinland Saga Season 2 sees us following Thorfinn again, but in a very different context. He's been enslaved, and he no longer has the will to live. And it's the storyline revolved around him and another slave named Einar working on this farm that I would genuinely say is one of the most beautiful, uplifting, inspiring arcs that I have ever seen in a story. And that thesis of the series, those words that Thors tells Thorfinn at the very beginning of the series, "You have no enemies," it's watching Thorfinn learn what those words really mean and putting them into action within his life that truly elevated this season to something extraordinary. Every character in this season, and I do mean every single character, plays such an important role in delivering that message to the audience. The way that everyone's stories play out here, the way that they intertwine, the way that it all pays off by the end. It's a mastery of storytelling that you rarely see in fiction, and I was crying or on the edge of my seat every single episode here. One of the weirdest things that I've actually heard said about this season is that it's boring. People say that it's slow. People say that this is a slice of life arc. I find those statements to be absolutely absurd. Yes, this arc is more methodical and doesn't involve as much action, but on the contrary, that's why I found Farmland so much more riveting. It feels like this season is deliberately crafted around its theming. There is less action, but in exchange, the action that is there feels so much more harrowing and so much more important. Everything is with the full intent of conveying the horrors of violence that this world is surrounded by to the audience. I think if you're watching Season 2 of Vinland and you're complaining that it's not as action-packed or cool like Season 1, you have completely missed the point. Vinland Saga Season 2 is a triumph in how to write a story. It's a triumph in how to create believable, relatable, organic characters. And it's a triumph in writing a story that can truly impart an incredibly deep and fundamental lesson to the audience. It's the best anime that I had the pleasure of watching in 2024, and it's one of the best anime I've ever seen in my life. So at last, we've reached the end of the video. If Furiosa is my favorite movie of the year, if Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is my game of the year, and if Vinland Saga Season 2 is my anime of the year, then what else is left? What, above any of those things, would I say encapsulates the best of everything in 2024? The thing that defined my year overall. If you look at the videos that I actually managed to release in 2024, then you can probably tell that I am a pretty big fan of One Piece. It's the first anime that I ever watched all the way back in middle school, and it's stayed a consistent part of my life for over 15 years now. I say that because I've never been quite consistent with keeping up with One Piece. I love this series to death. I see and have seen it every single day of my life due to my friends and the people that I follow, but it was this year that I really made an effort to get caught up to the series, and in doing so, really reignited my love for it in a way that I didn't think was possible. Whether it was catching up to the recent arcs in the manga, or seeing how much passion and effort Toei was putting into the anime, seeing the community discussion every single week, working on my vacation to release an hour-long Netflix live-action review, watching Megumi Ishitani's magnum opus with fan letter, hell, I even recently started playing a game that I never thought I would play, and even publicly shamed on my channel with World Seeker. One Piece is a part of my DNA at this point. I don't love every single piece of it. I don't think every decision Oda makes is the best one, but it ultimately doesn't matter, man. It's so ingrained in me. It's such an important part of my life that I'm always going to be here no matter what. And I say all of that because I don't have something long planned here. I don't have some elaborate marketing sell for One Piece tucked in my bag. At this point, you know what One Piece is. You know if you're interested in it or not. All I can say is that if you are interested, if you do have the desire to jump into this world and sail with the Straw Hat crew, you will be a part of the largest, funniest, most ambitious, most emotional, most thrilling, most life-changing adventure that has ever existed. The end is in sight, the story is coming to a close, and if you really do desire to be a part of it, I recommend jumping in as soon as you can, because it is the best of everything that I experienced in 2024. Thank you all so much for watching. Now, I'll be honest, guys, I did not think this would turn out as long as it did. I don't know if I will ever have the willpower to make a video this long again. If I do this format next year, there will be changes. So if you made it to the end of all this, I love you so much, and I really hope you enjoyed. And on that note, I'd actually like to give a special bonus award for Editor of the Year to my video editor, OtakuBox, man. I'm so sorry you had to edit this behemoth of a video, but I really want to give this guy a huge shout out because if you've been watching my other videos this year, you've probably noticed that they have been looking incredibly good. I'm so thankful to be working with him. He is insanely talented. That fan letter video is genuinely the best edited work that I have ever uploaded on this channel, and I just can't wait to get started working on whatever's next. Stay tuned for more. As long as I'm not working on these hour-long plus videos, I'm really going to be trying to release more often this year, and I just can't thank you all enough for continuing to support me, even despite how little I uploaded last year. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any of that in the future. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord server in the description. I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.